Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the 5th Annual Aspen Cyber Summit. I'm Vivian Schiller, the Director of Aspen Digital, and I am pleased to introduce our next panel. As a reminder, the full summit agenda and bios of all our speakers are available at aspencybersummit.org. And if you plan to tweet, and we encourage you to, please use the hashtag AspenCyber. I want to thank FireEye, Intel, and Proofpoint for making this week's summit possible and helping us convene this important set of conversations and to understand such a complicated year. We also want to acknowledge Blue Vector, SIGPA-NA, and the American Gas Association for their additional support. Up next, we have a conversation with Nick Thompson, the editor-in-chief of Wired, and Cloudflare COO and co-founder Michelle Zatlyn, who is also a member of Aspen's cybersecurity group. Over to you, Nick.
All right. Thank you, Vivian. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for hosting this awesome event. I am blown away by all the other folks doing all the other panels, and this should be great. So, as noted, I'm with Michelle Zatlyn, the co-founder and COO of Cloudflare. We used to describe Cloudflare as the most important company you've not heard of, but now, actually, after the last 2 years, everybody has heard of it. So, Michelle is all over it. Good afternoon, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great. Hi. Well, I'm in California, so it's still the morning for me. I've just finished my coffee. But good morning to those on the East Coast, and good morning to those on the West Coast, and good evening if you're in Europe. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here, and I will admit that I kind of wish we were in Aspen right now. That sounds pretty nice. As much as I like where I live, I miss traveling just a little bit.
I know traveling to Aspen was actually, of all the things that the trips that the pandemic cut short, Aspen is kind of the one that I miss the most. All right, well, let's get cracking. So this pandemic happened.
Yes.
You at Cloudflare are in the rare position where you get to actually watch the entire internet. So you've seen this crazy transformation as the world that used to happen IRL has now moved online. Tell me the weirdest, most surprising thing you've learned about how humans have used the internet since March 2020.
That we have all become better digital citizens. Everybody has gone online. We really have. I mean, what happened in March is very quickly, the pandemic kind of raised its level of severity so quickly, basically overnight. And I'm within a 2-week period, the amount of traffic online doubled around the world. This was not unique to the United States or Canada or UK. It was literally globally. So almost every country around the world saw a doubling of an increase of online traffic overnight. And so I say that because it's pretty remarkable for 2 reasons. First, that all of a sudden all these people who were doing things in real life went online to start to do it. And I really think that there were a lot of parents out there who said, I would never do online lessons for my kids. And next thing you know, they're doing online music lessons, and now it's really normal. It's actually almost even better not to go to the musicians, the music teacher's house. I can do it online or school online. But it's not just parents, it's older parents, Zoom calls, it's younger kids getting online. I mean, I look at my kids and it's kind of sad, but their digital skills surpass my 7-year-old can use the iPad scaringly too much. So also online. But the second thing that's been really interesting, because I bring this up is, and we're an infrastructure provider, so it's kind of my role to bring it up, is it's amazing that the internet held together as well as it did. I mean, do you think about it overnight, a doubling of traffic, which was, no one was expecting that. And by no one, I mean none of the cloud providers that really make this run behind the scenes were expecting that. And so it's pretty amazing it held together as well as it did. So I think those are 2, maybe in retrospect, not so obvious, but interesting kind of points that we've seen of just traffic way up around the world. And since then it's ebbed and flowed as restrictions have been lifted, but internet traffic is way up, and people are doing a lot more online. They're communicating, they're commercing, they're doing a lot more online than they were, doing a lot more business online. They're working in different ways online. They're being productive in different ways, using different tools than they were just in February of this year.
Well, I have one strong objection to what you said.
Okay, good.
Online music classes versus in-home. As a father of someone who has a son who practices the trombone right next to the home office, there's been some complexities in that particular dynamic, as much as I love having him there playing the bone. But it might start up again soon, as you all will hear. Let me ask you why the internet held together. So one hypothesis is there was this massive increase in traffic, but it was easier to handle than you might have thought because we're all at home. So it's just through Wi-Fi. So it's through these thick pipes, right? You know, all these Zooms are going on in my house, but it's all through a big fat Wi-Fi connection. We're not, going tower to tower, and there's not a handoff in the car. Is that part of the explanation, or why else has the internet not collapsed?
I mean, again, the true heroes of this pandemic, as we look back, are going to be the medical responders. I mean, what they've had to endure. I think we're all very grateful for their service. But I mean, maybe the faithful sidekick were a lot of the cloud-based companies that held together. I mean, whether you're as a person connecting through my Wi-Fi or cell tower is one thing, but there's somebody behind the scenes who has to make that connection happen, right? And doubling the traffic overnight is a big deal for all those companies who have to hold it together, including ours. And so all of the large global cloud providers, I mean, that's Amazon, like AWS, that's Google Cloud, it's Microsoft Azure, it's IBM. So it's Ali Cloud out of China, saw huge surges in traffic. And the fact that it kind of happened without a blip was quite, I think, remarkable. Network providers like Cloudflare, traffic way up, we're holding together. But behind the scenes, although it worked, that took a lot of people and technology to make sure that the internet kept running. And so there was a lot of network engineers, a lot of network administrators that were sweating the details for all of us to make it seamless for the end digital citizen like yourself. And so the network administrators who are making these cloud providers run globally kind of deserve some gold stars for holding the internet together during that huge spike in traffic.
Props to all the network engineers, except for the ones at the Delhi telephone company who cut me off right before I was about to give a talk to 1,000 people in about May. But we'll let them be. Tell me about something that some service or some system that has moved into the cloud much more quickly than you would have thought. Like, so for example, one thing that I've been interested in is how much of financial exchanges have moved into the cloud, right? And they've always been a mix of on-prem and cloud, but it seems like they're all going to be entirely cloud fairly soon, which is pretty different. What is something else where the move into the cloud has been interesting or surprising?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many examples. So let me start with some obvious ones, and I'll maybe move up to some not obvious, because I think this is really interesting. So we'll start with a small business owner, okay? Yoga teacher, used to do all their yoga classes in person. All of a sudden, the studio closed. Yoga teachers don't have big margins, right? They're kind of living almost paycheck to paycheck. And so a lot of them pivoted, or some really pivoted to online classes and using online video streaming. We have something called Stream, but there's other providers out there where they're doing digital online video classes, and where now you're not just connecting with your community, you can build an audience globally, and it's all digitally online first. So it's kind of this digital first strategy. So that's one example. A second example is a very well-known consumer company. They are a consumer foods company, kind of a rising star, I would say, and they supply a lot of their product to restaurants. Well, restaurants have had a hard time during this because especially in the early days, we couldn't go and support them. And so they very quickly pivoted to a direct-to-consumer brand. That was not even in their plans. And so they went from March thinking that they were selling to their supply chain to restaurants to being like, oh my goodness, restaurants are cutting all their orders. We got to stay in business. So they pivoted to building a digital direct-to-consumer brand for their particular product, and they're selling directly to customers their food item. Which, if you think about that, it's pretty amazing that this business was able to pivot and kind of change, take something that wasn't even a strategy and create a strategy and make it happen. And what I think is pretty incredible is how quickly they could spin it up. And they did not build all the technology themselves. They had the great product, but they used services like Cloudflare and others to build the storefront and get their connected to their audience and start to sell direct to consumer. So that's the second example. Third example is something like DoorDash or any of the meal delivery companies. DoorDash is about to go public. There was a great article a few months ago about this. So this is public information where, like, again, in March, like everybody in DoorDash was uploading restaurant menus online to help these restaurants become digital first strategies. And it wasn't the restaurant doing it. Some of them were, but it was like almost like DoorDash were like, okay, we're going to help you. And they've seen something like an 700% increase in the amount of demand. And it's one of these ideas, we all have to eat. We can't go to the restaurant, but hey, can we support them? Can we help do it? And the technology through a company like DoorDash, helping make it easy to order, identify what we can make, and then getting it delivered to us is pretty impressive. So I love that story, because I just think it's kind of like us all banding together to help make these digital first strategies come to life, and not making it one by one, but doing it in mass. So I think that's really interesting. So those are those. And then there's the large established organizations that you kind of think of as slow, stodgy, last to move, where we've definitely had the CIOs, the CISO say, all of a sudden, my digital transformation, my digital first project that I thought was going to happen 2 years from now has been pulled up by 2 years. We're doing it now. And it's in this case, at this particular company, it was like an oil and gas company, where they found all their employees at home. And it was one of these things, they'd spent so much time securing their corporate network. And they were like, our corporate network is rock solid. And all of a sudden their employees were at home. And it just by nature, our home networks aren't as solid as our corporate networks, because we haven't invested as much as securing them. And not only that, they've got 3 unissued personal devices connecting, to their work things too. And so a lot of these large industrial companies have said, wow, I got to front load. I have to make it easier to kind of get my next generation user-centric VPN approach together, because the old model is not working. And so there's just been a huge shift for things that have worked for the last 10 years. There's been a lot of hardware boxes that have held the internet together to make it work. And what's really interesting, the next 10 years is all about these cloud services that are going to make the internet work. And it's really just accelerated the trend. I saw Harley Finkelstein from Shopify, it's just Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So Shopify was all over that. And, he said something on his Twitter yesterday. He said 2013 has arrived here now in 2020. And there's some truth to that. It's like where we thought we were going to be 5 or 10 years from now, it's happening now. And a lot of these transformations are happening faster. And this idea of like, oh, these businesses are slow to pivot. Actually, the best businesses have pivoted very quickly.
Well, let's talk about cybersecurity, because if you had asked me in March or April what I expected would happen, I would have predicted a boom in online education. I would have predicted a boom in healthcare, and I also would have predicted massive hacking, right? For just the reasons you described, right? I'm outside of the Condé Nast building. Not only am I outside of the Condé Nast building, but my kids are using my phone and clicking on every Russian link they see, right? And so how have we not had a massive hacking catastrophe yet? Is that A, because things happen that I wouldn't have predicted that have kept us safe, or B, because it's going to happen tomorrow and the bad guys have just been laying the traps and waiting to, crack the distributed network that we've all created?
So I think that there's a couple pieces to your question that I think it's important to spend some time on, and I'll answer what you asked at the very end. But I think there's a couple prefaces, especially because there was a ransomware panel right before us, which we didn't get to hear all of it. So there are an increase in attacks online. Now, that's great that you haven't seen and you have been the target of it. So be thankful. But like there are a lot of businesses who have been the target of it. And so we did, Forrester did a study. We worked with them to do a study. And since the pandemic, we surveyed 300 companies around the world, global. 58% of them had dealt with a data breach since the pandemic started. 58%, that's a lot. That's a high percentage. Now, I don't think they're high profile, like some of the ones that the Equifax or the Target breaches, like those haven't been. But I actually think that if you're a business owner, whether you're a medium-sized business owner or a small business owner or a large corporation, there are a lot of teams who are on pins and needles because there are some really bad things going on. The panel before was ransomware. There's been a huge uptake in these network ransomware initiatives where there's an organization called Fancy Bear that go by some other names as well. They took down the New Zealand Stock Exchange in May. It's serious. And it's not just, there are many American businesses, global businesses who are being targeted by this ransomware event. And is kind of, the bad news, and then I'll tell you the good news, is a lot of CISOs, like CIOs, CISOs, CTOs receive these ransomwares and they don't know what to do until they pay it quietly because they don't want it to be they don't want to be on the cover of Wired. They just don't want to be on the cover of Wired as the example child. And so they pay it quietly and make them go away. And that's because these old hardware boxes that have held things together for the last 10 years aren't working in the new world of a cloud-based service that's much more infinitely scalable and stops these sorts of things. And so again, we've seen a lot of prospects pay it and or come under and be like, my God, what do I do? And again, the good news is a service like Cloudflare and others can help now make that problem much easier. So that's good. And I know you said at the beginning, everyone knows us, but the truth is most of the world has no idea we exist. So we have to continue to raise our profile. No, like there are way better solutions today than there were 5 years ago to deal with these new things. So I guess the first part of your question is that there are some businesses that I've definitely seen an increase, and it's not just some segment. It's been small businesses, medium-sized, large corporations. And I do think there are a lot of people who are sweating the details behind the scenes. And that's a very violating experience. And so again, at Cloudflare, we really have been very busy this year making sure that we can help our customers or potential customers solve these problems because we want them to be ahead of it and protected, not behind. And we're lucky to say that our technology is very effective at stopping that. So I think there's that. So I guess that's the answer to your question where, again, I think there are better solutions today that help bridge this than there were 5 years ago, but you have to know about them. You have to be using them. And if you're using antiquated technologies, then there's lots of gaps and you are being subject to it. And I think that you and your kids have just been lucky so far.
Or maybe I'm lying and I've actually been paying ransomware like left and right.
Gotta go check. Let's do an audit of your bank account after. How about that?
That would be fine. I mean, I didn't mean that everybody knows everything about Cloudflare. Like, I don't think my mom has heard of it, but I just meant everybody at the Aspen Cyber Summit has heard of Cloudflare. Let's stay on cybersecurity for a minute. You recently gave an interesting interview where you said that cybersecurity is going to move to something more like a water treatment analogy. Tell me what you meant and what Cloudflare's role will play there.
It's so interesting. That's like, I'm not a very controversial person. I don't think anyone who knows me would say, oh, Michelle Zatlyn is not very controversial. That's probably the most controversial thing I've ever seen. I've ever said that really got a lot of people to set up. Some people really did not like it. And I meant it in a positive way, not the negative way. And, some of the feedback I got was, well, you're going to discourage people from getting into the industry. And I was like, well, no, people should get into cybersecurity. It's really important. We got a lot of work to be done. But, when I sit back and I think about, okay, where is the world going? What's changed is these cloud-based network services. And again, this is very self-serving. Cloudflare is one of them. We're not the only cloud-based cybersecurity company, but there are many others. And I do think that the model, the architecture of what we're doing and others are doing is very well suited to help future-proof businesses for the next 10 years than what's happened in the last 10 years. And I'll just give you a quick history lesson for the folks listening, like a bit of context, and then I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by this water treatment plant. If you go back to the original specs of the internet, security was never built in, which is why we have all these cybersecurity companies. It was never built into the RFCs. It was kind of there. You can go find them, and at the bottom it says security to be included at a later date. Because originally the internet was invented to connect academic institutions, right? And so I don't really think Sir Tim really could envision everything it's become, connecting us and our music lessons and the communication and how we learn and how we do business. Like, it's really become this huge backbone to all of our lives, and how many people are online and how global it is. It's amazing. It's amazing invention. We're so lucky to live in a world with all of it. And so what's changed is, again, these cloud-based services, technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence. All of a sudden, if you think about cybersecurity, what happened for the last 10 years is if you were an attacker, a bad actor online, it was actually fairly easy to have more resources than any individual business. Because we had millions of businesses around the world, some really investing in it, some not. And so if you're a bad actor, you kind of just had to amass a certain amount of resources to overwhelm them, and they could really go a far way. What's happening in the cloud with a service like Cloudflare is, again, we now have 25 million internet properties, over 3 million businesses that are using Cloudflare. Okay, this is a lot of companies around the world, global, and all of a sudden we've been able to band all the legitimate businesses together, and we have way more resources than any one bad actor. It's just very hard to have more resources when you band all of those resources together. And so when you have a system like Cloudflare sitting in front of whatever your workload or application is behind the scenes, whatever passes through us, it's like we're a bouncer. We just stop any known attacker. And we know who the attacker is because we have 25 million data points to compare it against. And every second, billions of requests are going through our network. And we're just using machine learning and AI to figure out who's doing malicious things and who's not. And so it's all of a sudden, cybersecurity is a data science play. And those companies with really amazing data science, which we have, really amazing cybersecurity data, which we have a huge source because we have so many customers around the world, can start to build the technology to stop it. And this is what I mean by water treatment plants. Like back in the day, you couldn't just easily pour water from your tap. It wasn't trustworthy. And so a lot of multi-stakeholders got together and they said, okay, we want to be able to trust the water coming out of our taps. And I think that this is kind of a way that the internet's going to go over the next year, is that you're going to connect to a network like Cloudflare or others. We won't just be the only ones. And we will clean the traffic in the sense of getting rid of all the known malicious things and making it speedier and faster and better. So what comes out the other end is better for everyone. If you're a business, it's like, great, I don't have to deal with all those headaches anymore. If you're an end customer, like your kids, you can feel like you can click on any link you want because you have a lot of confidence that it's not going to bring malware or damaging things into your home environment. And so I hope that's the future. I mean, I think we should all hope that's the future 10 years from now, and where it's all more safe, all tides rise, and that all of a sudden you don't have to be spending 10 billion, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, billions of dollars on these solutions because you're worried. Like it should just everything should get safer, and the product development should get safer at all these application companies where you have intrinsic security, the way the code reviews, everything needs to get safer, and all tides have to rise. And we'll have a whole new set of challenges 10 years from now to deal with. But that's what I hope the future is like. That it's just like, wow, we kind of go back and put in what the internet said to be completed at a later date. It's kind of like, I think we're doing that now, and it's going to come to fruition within the next 10 years.
I am all in favor of that, though. I'm not certain I want all the tides to rise if I'm working at a sewage treatment plant. So let me ask you a question from the audience, because it's a great one. Michael Nelson. Years ago, Cloudflare entered into a partnership with Baidu. What's changed since then? What lessons can you share about working with Chinese companies and the Chinese government?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Thanks for the question, Michael. It's people are connecting around the world. And what's interesting is early on, we were a tiny, tiny company. And the second largest source of traffic from coming to Cloudflare customer sites was from China. So we had a lot of Chinese visitors trying to access information or do business on our early customer site. And that's continued. And then we have a lot of American companies who have big customer segments within China. So it's gone both ways. And so we really believed in having one global network around the world. And we had to find a way to work with a partner in China to help make one global network. Because again, Cloudflare helps make the internet faster, safer, and more reliable for any size business. That is our promise. And we felt really strongly that China had to be included in that. Like we didn't think it could be everyone except for China. And so we worked really hard early on. And so we were quite a young company when we really started to be serious about our Chinese strategy. And we partnered with Baidu, and we've since partnered with a second Chinese company called JD Cloud. And what that means is if you are a Cloudflare customer, if you are a large company like Garmin, they can use Cloudflare as a network sitting in front of all the Garmin devices, which are around the world, including in China. And they can have one uniform control plane for a performance, cybersecurity, and reliability stance. And what they've seen is a 4 times increase in ROI, and improvement in China increased by 400% because they have one global network to manage it. And so that's what a lot of the vision that we saw 5 years ago of why we thought that was so important has played out, where companies, some American, some European, turns out China's a huge market for them, and they want one architecture that works to provide this performance, security, and reliability. If you're the CIO of this company, it's like, great. You say to your CEO, it's great you want to go into China, but I got to manage it. And I don't want to have to manage a totally other network. And so to have this network layer that you can kind of see this control plane and have one set of cybersecurity, one set of protection, one set of global performance protection, one set of reliability makes a huge difference. Identity and access management makes a huge, huge difference in the complexities to the teams that have to hold these all together behind the scenes. And so I guess what's changed is we've added another partner with JD Cloud, and it's become more and more important. And we've seen a lot of businesses local in China who want to connect globally. These China businesses want to get access to the markets rest of the world. And they are saying, man, I need to get access to the European consumers and North American consumers. And I want one provider to be able to help me do that. And then we've seen so many multinationals out of America, Europe, rest of Asia say, I need to be able to service China, and I want one provider to be able to do it. And so, I mean, that makes sense. We're all very connected. And again, it's kind of back to the internet's connected us all in many ways that I think we did not expect even 10 years ago.
What if the Chinese government says, hey, it's so great you have that Cloudflare in front of Garmin, but we'd really like access to that data because we want to know, where all of our dissidents happen to be jogging today, right? So how do you handle that request?
I have a lot. Turns out running a large technology company doing networking, I have a lot more gray hair than when I started because of questions like this. These are really serious questions, and I'll answer your question, but just zooming out, because that's a very Cloudflare specific question, but I think just zooming out, I strongly believe that if you're a technology company, the next 5 years is all about policy. The companies who really lean into understanding policy, partnering with policymakers, and the policymakers who become better technologists, those are the people who are going to invent the future, because it's just, they're colliding. You see it everywhere around the world. You see all these policy changes. You see some people very happy, some people very angry. And so there's like this huge multi-shareholder approach where people are saying, this isn't working, this is working great. And people are coming together and we're going to make progress. But I think the people who are really going to write the laws for the future, and this is why the Aspen Institute is so important, are the policymakers who become better technologists, and the technologists who become better policymakers. So this is an example of a question that if you're running a tech company, you have to be able to have an answer to. And I can almost guarantee that no tech entrepreneur starts thinking they're going to have to answer that question, right? Or if you're a CEO of a large company, you're like, I'm not qualified to make this question answer. Let's call our GC, and the GC saying, well, I'm not qualified to, I don't know China, let's get some outside counsel. It's complicated. It just hasn't really had to come up. And so you got to be really thoughtful. There are some companies a bit ahead of you, but it's a small handful. And so in this question, we are a US law abiding organization. So we follow the law. And that means with court orders, if there's been due diligence, and again, there's lots of amazing things about the internet. There's some really ugly, gross, bad things that happen online. And with court orders and due process, we follow the law. We say, wow, okay, thank you, court order. This does seem legitimate. We should remove it from our network. And that happens all the time, and it does very well. But that's not your question. In this case, there is no court order. This is a government saying, I want this. And it's not even that. Sometimes it's the US government. Sometimes it's other governments. And, we have a story where we were a 40-person company. We got served with a national security letter. When you're a 40-person company, this was years and years ago. We're a lot larger now. We're over 1,700 people now. But it was a really scary event. And it was actually the US government asking for a bunch of information. And so we worked with the EFF and ended up suing the US government. We said, because the national security letter at the time had no due process. We said, there needs to be due process if you want us to comply with this. And so we ended up winning the case, which is why I can talk about it. And it became a big example. And so we've been very principled on this point, where we're a law-abiding organization with due process, but we are not, otherwise, no. And so in this case, the answer is no. And we've taken a very hard stance about that. And we've been very principled. We've written about a ton. We've drawn very strong lines in the sand. And we think that's really important, to not undermine the trust of our customers.
All right, well, right as we reach perhaps the most complex issue in technology and policy, we are at time. I want to say thank you to Michelle, and I hope that Garrett and Vivian, I hope you caught that little bit. We said the next 5 years of technology are about policy, because that is going to be great for the trailer for the Aspen Cyber Summit in 2021. All right, we're leaving now. We'll be back in just a minute with more Aspen Cyber Summit. Thank you so much.